Most of these stories didn't start with anything obviously wrong. They started during regular night shifts in places where nothing ever really happens. The kind of jobs where the hardest part is staying awake and watching the clock crawl toward morning. Every person you're about to hear from was doing something completely normal, working a fast food window, sitting in a security booth, driving for extra money, watching over an empty gym. Places they'd been in 100 times before, doing the same routines they always did. And that's why what happened stuck with them. At some point during the night, something changed. Not in a dramatic way at first, just enough to make them notice that the shift wasn't going the way it usually did. A person who didn't make sense, a sound that kept repeating, a situation that felt slightly off, even though nothing was clearly wrong. By the time they realized they should have trusted that feeling, it was already too late to pretend nothing happened. Some of them quit their jobs right after. Some tried to move on and act like it was nothing. And some still think about it whenever they're awake late at night, wondering how close they came to something much worse. This is where the first one starts. My name isn't important, but for context, I was 23 and working nights at a fast food place just off Route 17 in Ohio. It wasn't a Burger King, just a small franchise that stayed open late for truckers and insomniacs. I'd been on the overnight shift for almost a year, usually alone after midnight. From 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., it was just me, the humming fryers, and the drive-thru headset. About a month before everything went wrong, something strange started happening. It was around 1:40 a.m. when a sedan pulled up to the speaker. Male voice, calm, polite. He ordered the same thing every time, a double bacon burger, large fries, and a soda. Nothing weird about the order itself. What stood out was how he paid. He never opened his window more than a few inches, just enough to slide his card out. His windows were dark, darker than legally allowed, and I never saw his face. The first time, he paid, took the receipt, and drove off without coming to the pickup window. I stood there holding the bag, thinking he'd loop around. He never did. After 10 minutes, I clocked it as abandoned and ate it on my break. Free food happens. I didn't overthink it. Then it happened again the next week. Same car, same voice, same exact order. Same thing. Paid, receipt taken, gone. I remember laughing to myself, thinking someone out there really hated money. By the third time, I knew it was intentional. Same voice, same timing, always between 1 and 2 a.m. I stopped questioning it. I just accepted that every few nights I was getting a free meal. After a while, I started expecting it. If a few days passed without seeing that car, I'd catch myself wondering if tonight was the night. That should have been my first red flag. One night, around 2:10 a.m., the familiar voice came through the speaker again. Same order, same calm tone. I was already reaching for the register when he added something else, almost casually. "Hope you're still enjoying those burgers, Daniel." That's my first name. I never told him. My name tag only had my nickname on it, and even that was barely readable. I froze, headset pressed against my ear, staring at the empty parking lot camera feed. I asked who this was. I asked how he knew my name. I asked again. He never answered. This time, he didn't pull up to pay. I heard the engine rev and the tires crunch as he sped off. I finished my shift shaken, checking the lot every few minutes, jumping at every sound. When I got home just before sunrise, there was an envelope on my apartment door. No stamp, no address, just my full name written in block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper that said, "You know what you did. 3 days." I stood there reading it over and over, my hands shaking, my stomach twisting. The worst part was that I didn't know what it meant. I still don't.
I didn't sleep at all that day. I called in sick, left the lights on, and kept replaying everything in my head. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, maybe someone from work messing with me, but nobody there knew my full name either. I paid rent, worked nights, went home. That was my whole life. There was nothing to know. The 3 days passed without anything happening. No calls, no notes, no strange cars outside my building. By the third night, I almost felt stupid for being scared. That illusion didn't last long. The next shift I worked, just after 1 a.m., the same sedan pulled into the drive-thru lane, same timing, same voice. This time, he didn't order food. "Grab something to write with," he said calmly. Before I could respond, he rattled off an address somewhere north of town, near old farmland and half-abandoned industrial lots. Then he told me I had 48 hours to leave $10,000 there, cash, no police. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was impossible. I told him I didn't have that kind of money. He paused for a moment, then said, "You'll figure it out," and drove away. That night, I finally called the police. They took the report, nodded along, wrote things down. Without threats recorded or footage, there wasn't much they could do. They told me to stay alert. 2 nights later, something came through my living room window. I was half asleep on the couch when glass exploded across the floor. I dropped to the ground, heart pounding, convinced for a second that I'd been shot at. But it was just a rock, a brick-sized piece of concrete, actually. Tied to it was another note: "You missed the deadline." That time, the police took it more seriously. They checked the area, asked neighbors questions, but whoever did it was long gone. No cameras caught anything useful. After that, I stopped going to work. I couldn't afford to move, but I couldn't bring myself to stand behind that window again either. A week passed. Nothing happened. No more notes, no more cars. Then my manager called and told me someone had been coming through the drive-thru late at night asking if I was working, ordering the same meal, paying, and leaving. I quit the next morning. I don't know what he thinks I did. I don't know why he chose me, but every few nights I still hear a car slow down outside my apartment, idle for a moment, then drive away. And I don't look out the window anymore.
A couple years later, when I was trying to get my life together, I started driving nights for a rideshare app in Arizona, mostly weekends. The money was better after dark, especially around the college bars downtown. I'd usually drive from about 9 p.m. until 2 or 3 in the morning, then head home when things slowed down. One Saturday night, right as I was about to log off, a request came through. Pickup was downtown, but the drop-off was way out past the suburbs, almost 40 minutes into the desert. I almost declined it, but the fare was unusually high, so I took it. The passenger was a young woman, quiet but normal, no red flags. The drive was uneventful, and I dropped her off at a small house on a dark, rural road just after 2 a.m. As soon as she went inside, the area felt wrong. No streetlights, no other cars, just empty roads stretching into blackness. I turned around and started heading back toward the city. About 10 minutes later, I saw a car stopped in the middle of the road ahead, hazard lights blinking. As I got closer, I noticed 2 people standing in front of it, waving their arms. My first instinct was not to stop. Everything in me said keep driving, but they looked older, maybe late 40s or early 50s, and I convinced myself they needed help. I stopped about 20 feet away and cracked my window just enough to talk. The woman did most of the talking. She said a bridge farther down the road had collapsed earlier that night, claimed they barely avoided driving straight into a wash. She pointed behind them into the darkness and told me I'd end up in the river if I kept going. Naturally, I asked how I was supposed to get back. The man spoke up then. He told me about a dirt turnoff a little farther down the road, said it cut through the desert and connected to the highway. Warned me it was rough, but safer than the bridge. I thanked them and pulled away, but something about the interaction stuck with me. The way they talked felt practiced, like they'd rehearsed it. When I saw the dirt road they mentioned, narrow and barely visible between scrub and trees, I didn't turn. I kept driving. A few minutes later, I reached the bridge. It was fine, old but solid. No damage, no water underneath, nothing. I crossed it without issue and hit the highway shortly after. I didn't sleep much that morning. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I drove back out there in the middle of the afternoon. The road looked completely normal. No broken bridge, no warning signs. But when I reached the dirt turnoff, there was something new. A wooden sign nailed to a tree. Fresh. It read, "Dead End." That sign wasn't there before. I would have seen it, even in the dark. I parked and stood there for a moment, staring down the path. In daylight, it didn't look threatening, just a dirt road disappearing into brush. I thought about walking a little way down it. As soon as I stepped away from my car, I heard a scream. It came from deep in the desert, down that road. A woman's scream, long, raw, and sudden. I didn't investigate. I ran back to my car and left. I haven't been back since. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I still think about how easily I could have taken that turn.
A few winters back, I worked overnight security at a distribution warehouse outside a small city in Pennsylvania. I was 26 and had been there maybe 9 months. The shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and I was always alone on site. There was a supervisor on call, but realistically, it was just me, a radio, and a wall of security monitors. The building sat in an industrial zone with nothing around it but empty lots and other dark warehouses. At night, the area was completely dead. My routine never changed. Clock in, walk the exterior fence, check the loading docks, then spend most of the night watching cameras and doing hourly patrols. The night everything went wrong started out completely normal. It was cold, light snow drifting down, the kind that makes everything quieter than usual. My first patrol was uneventful, doors locked, no vehicles, no footprints besides my own. Around 1:20 a.m., one of the motion sensors pinged. Loading dock, camera 3. That wasn't unusual. Snow and wind triggered false alerts all the time. I pulled up the feed and watched for a minute. Nothing, just snow blowing through the floodlights. 10 minutes later, the same alert, same camera. Then again. By 2:30, that camera had triggered 6 times. None of the others did. Every time I checked, I saw nothing, but I started to notice that the motion always seemed to come from the very edge of the frame, like something was there, but never fully visible. At 3 a.m., I grabbed my flashlight and went outside. The dock area was silent, no wind, no movement. The snow on the ground was untouched, no footprints, no tire marks. I checked every bay door, all locked. I went back inside feeling stupid for being nervous. About 20 minutes later, I heard a sound echo through the building. It was metal scraping against concrete, slow, heavy, like something being dragged across the floor somewhere deep inside the warehouse. I checked the interior cameras. All 6 showed empty aisles, long rows of shelving, yellow overhead lights, no movement. I stood there staring at the screens, trying to rationalize it. Thermal expansion, machinery settling, anything. An hour later, the sound came again. This time, it was louder, dragging, then a sharp metallic bang, like something had slammed into a door. When I pulled up the cameras again, feed 1 through 5 were normal. Camera 6 went black. 3 seconds of static. Then it came back on. The angle was wrong, tilted slightly left, like someone had bumped it. I didn't have a choice anymore. I radioed in, got no response, and went inside with my flashlight. The warehouse floor was massive, easily 80,000 square feet. At night, the lights were dimmed, throwing long shadows between the shelves. I was halfway down the main aisle when I heard footsteps to my left. They stopped when I stopped. I stood there in silence, listening to my own breathing, every nerve screaming. Finally, I called out, identifying myself as security, telling whoever was there to come out. No answer. I finished the patrol without seeing anyone. That was the worst part. I knew someone had been inside with me. I just never saw them. Nothing else happened that shift. Maintenance found nothing the next day. No forced entry, no missing equipment. I could tell no one really believed me. I quit 2 weeks later. I still don't know who or what moved that camera.
My first real job was overnight staff at a 24-hour gym in a rough part of northern Illinois. I was 19 on a gap year and needed money more than pride. The gym ran on keycard access, so after about midnight, it was usually just me and 1 or 2 members scattered through the building. My shift that night was from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Long, quiet, painfully boring. By 2 in the morning, I'd finished cleaning, paperwork, and my usual walkthroughs. I was sitting in the office watching the camera feeds when I noticed someone I didn't recognize. He was on a treadmill in the far corner of the cardio area. That alone wasn't strange. New members came in sometimes. What caught my attention was the speed. I pulled up the equipment monitor on my screen. The treadmill was set to 9 miles per hour. Fast, but not insane. What bothered me was that he never slowed down. 10 minutes passed, then 15. He didn't break stride, didn't touch the controls. When I zoomed in on the camera, I felt my stomach drop. He was barefoot. No shoes, no socks, just skin hitting the belt over and over. He was wearing old, torn clothes like he'd slept in them for weeks. His hair was long and matted. His face didn't move. No strain, no blinking, just staring straight ahead with his mouth slightly open. By then, everyone else had left. It was just me and him in the building. I tried to calm myself down and remembered the rule about footwear. I figured I could at least use that as an excuse to intervene. I left the office and walked toward the cardio area, rehearsing what I'd say. When I turned the corner, I stopped cold. The treadmill was covered in blood. His feet were shredded, skin split open, blood sprayed backward with every step, splattering the machine and the floor behind him. He didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't slow down. I shouted for him to stop. My voice shook, but I yelled again, louder. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me at all. Then, without turning his head, he said, "Are you there?" His voice was flat, calm, not out of breath. I told him again to stop. He repeated it, "Are you there?" The pool of blood beneath the treadmill was spreading. That's when I backed away and ran for the office. I pulled out my phone to call the police, but before dialing, I looked up at the monitors. He was staring directly into the camera, still running, still bleeding, mouth wide open. I turned away just as a scream echoed through the gym. Not words, just sound, raw and deep. A moment later, the treadmill camera went empty. I flipped through the feeds frantically until I saw him in the employee hallway.
He was standing 6 feet from the office door. I locked it just as the handle started shaking. He screamed again while I was on the phone with dispatch, pounding the door hard enough to rattle the frame. It lasted maybe 3 minutes, but it felt endless. Then it stopped. Silence. When the police arrived, he was gone. No blood trail, no record of his key card, nothing. I quit the next day. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if that door hadn't locked. I didn't tell anyone about this for years, mostly because I knew how it would sound. Even now, writing it out feels like tempting fate. But this happened back in 2015, and it still creeps into my head whenever I'm alone outdoors for too long. At the time, I lived in Arizona and spent most weekends hiking. Long ones, 8, sometimes 10 hours. I liked going alone. It was the only way I could shut my brain off. No phone service, no conversations, just my boots on dirt and the sound of wind moving through dry brush. That day, I picked a trail I'd never been on before. There wasn't even a real parking area, just a wide patch of dirt on the side of the road. The trailhead was almost hidden, tucked behind a wall of thick bushes, like someone didn't want it to be found. The path itself was faint, barely more than disturbed earth. I didn't mind. I actually preferred it that way. The trail started in open desert, then slowly climbed into a medium mountain range. As I went higher, the trees thinned out and looked wrong, dry, gray. A lot of them were dead, some fallen straight across the path, others split and rotting like they'd been dead for years. It was obvious no one maintained the trail anymore. Eventually, the path narrowed into overgrown brush, thorny enough to snag my clothes and scratch my arms. Still, I could tell I was on a trail, so I kept going. That's when I heard it. A whistle. It came from somewhere up the mountain, faint but clear. A short melody, just a few notes, then silence. I stopped walking. My first thought was another hiker. It wasn't that weird, I told myself. People whistle. I stood there for a few seconds, listening, then shrugged it off and continued. About 20 minutes later, I heard it again. Same tune, this time louder and closer. That uncomfortable knot formed in my stomach, but I forced myself to ignore it. I wasn't about to turn around just because some guy decided to whistle on a trail. Still, I slid my hand into my pocket and wrapped my fingers around my pocket knife, just in case. Not long after that, I came across a tree that had fallen directly across the trail. Thick branches blocked the way, and the thorns made climbing over it a bad idea. I stepped off to the right to go around. That's when I noticed the valley. It was shallow, like a dried riverbed, and right in the middle of it sat something that immediately made my skin crawl. A den. Large sticks stacked together in a way that was way too deliberate to be natural. Whoever made it knew what they were doing. That was when everything clicked at once. The whistle, the hidden trail, the den. Someone was living out here. I decided right then that I was done. I turned to leave, and the whistle came from directly behind me. I froze. My heart felt like it stopped entirely. Slowly, I turned back toward the valley, expecting to see a person standing there. Instead, there was a goat.
It stood perfectly still near the den, exactly where the sound had come from. It was massive, far bigger than any goat I'd seen before. Its eyes locked onto mine, and I had the overwhelming sensation of being examined, like it was sizing me up. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. I started backing away, never breaking eye contact. As soon as my foot hit the ground behind me, the goat opened its mouth. It didn't bleat, it whistled. The same melody, clean, controlled, wrong. That was it. I turned and ran. I don't even remember the pain from falling over rocks and branches. I just ran. Behind me, I heard the whistle one last time, echoing faintly down the mountain. I never went back to that trail. Years later, I stumbled across stories about skinwalkers. I don't know if that's what I saw. All I know is that whatever stood in that valley wasn't just an animal.
Story 2: The Snipe Hunt. Every summer, my family went camping in Wisconsin with a group of family friends. It was tradition. Same campground, same RVs, same jokes. One of those jokes was the snipe hunt. If you know what that is, you already know where this is going. My dad and his best friend Billy convinced all the kids that snipes were real, aggressive bird-like creatures that lived in trees and only came out at night. Every year they swore they'd heard one nearby. We were kids, we believed every word. The year this happened, I was 8. My sister and I were buzzing with excitement all day when they announced that tonight was the night. They handed out sticks for protection. One kid even brought a wooden sword. As the sun went down, we headed into the woods. Billy ran ahead to scout. About 10 minutes in, we heard rustling overhead. Billy leapt out from behind a tree, screaming and covered in red paint. He yelled that a snipe had attacked him. All the kids panicked. I ran without thinking, crashing through the woods until I found a tree with a thick bush growing into it. I shoved myself inside and tried not to cry, barely breathing. After a few minutes, everything went quiet. That's when I saw it. It looked like a dog, but wrong. Its legs were too long, too thin. Its head was misshapen, like something had twisted it. Patches of fur clung to its body in random places, leaving skin exposed. It moved slowly, and as it did, I heard a faint moaning sound. I was terrified, but I couldn't look away. The longer I stared, the heavier the dread became. It felt like the air itself was pressing down on me. Then I heard my name. The creature stopped and looked me straight at. Its eyes met mine for just a second before my dad grabbed my arm and lifted me out of the bush, scolding me for running off and apologizing for the prank. I twisted around to look again. The thing was gone. That was the year I learned snipes weren't real. I spent years telling myself I'd just seen a big coyote. But even now, sometimes when I'm biking or hiking, I catch a glimpse of something watching me from the trees, and my stomach drops the same way it did back then. Story 3: The Deer at the Cabin. My family lived in a cabin in rural Canada for nearly 10 years. No roads led directly to it, just faint trails connecting us to a few other families scattered miles apart. We had a small farm, vegetables, livestock. Life was quiet, peaceful, until it wasn't. One night, I was up late reading when I heard the cattle outside panicking. That alone was strange. I pulled the curtain back and saw them clustered at the far end of the field, moving like they were trying to get away from something. On the opposite side, near the tree line, stood a deer. It was huge, completely still, facing the house. Something about it made my skin crawl, but I told myself I was overreacting and went back to reading. A few weeks later, my wife woke me up in the middle of the night. She told me to listen. Something was moving outside the cabin, slowly. It sounded like a stick dragging along the walls, circling the house. I checked on the kids, grabbed my rifle, and looked out every window. At the last one, I saw the deer again, standing in the trees, watching. The next morning, I walked to a neighbor's cabin to ask if he'd noticed anything strange. Halfway there, I heard leaves crunch behind me. The deer stood on the path, less than 20 feet away. This time, I saw its eyes clearly. White around the iris, small pupils, human. I ran the rest of the way, barely holding myself together. When I told my neighbor what I seen, he wasn't surprised. He talked calmly about skinwalkers, about how they only appear when they want something or when you've disturbed them. We moved closer to town not long after. I never told my wife or kids what I saw on that path. Some things are better left unsaid.
My new roommate wasn't on any paperwork. Senior year blurred together for me. Same campus, same cracked sidewalks, same apartment with the heater that either screamed or did nothing at all. My old roommate, Tyler, had graduated in December and moved back to Ohio to live with his parents and reset, which is what everyone calls it when they're broke and tired. I didn't blame him. I just kept thinking about the empty bedroom across the hall and who they'd put in there next. Housing said they'd fill the vacancy shortly. That was the phrase, shortly, like it was a package delivery. The knock came the next afternoon while I was standing in the kitchen eating cereal out of a mug because all the bowls were dirty. 3 knocks, hard, too close together. I remember thinking it sounded impatient, like whoever it was already felt annoyed with me for not opening the door fast enough. I opened it, spoon still in my hand. A guy stood there, about my age, maybe early 20s, tall but slouched, like his posture was borrowed. His hair was dark and stringy, hanging in his face, and he was holding a single cardboard box against his chest, not sealed, just folded shut. He looked past me into the apartment before he spoke. Apartment 367? His voice sounded rough, like he'd been whispering all day. Yeah, I said. Can I help you? I'm moving in. That wasn't how it usually went. Tyler's replacement was supposed to check in with housing first, get keys, sign things. This guy just showed up. Oh, okay, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. I'm Mark. He shifted the box to one arm and offered me his hand. It was cold, damp. Ethan, he said. His grip lingered half a second too long, then dropped away like he'd forgotten why he reached out in the first place. When he stepped inside, the smell hit me. Not sweat, not body odor. Something sharper, chemical, like a freshly mopped hospital hallway. My eyes actually stung a little. You, clean a lot? I asked without thinking. Ethan's mouth twitched. You'd be surprised how dirty things are. I gave him the quick tour. Kitchen, living room, bathroom, his room at the end of the hall. He barely reacted. Just stood there, eyes moving, like he was counting things. Outlets, corners, the space between furniture. Use whatever. Dishes, TV, Wi-Fi's written on the fridge.
He nodded, didn't say thanks. The silence got heavy fast, the kind where you start noticing your own breathing and it feels rude. I told him I had a shift at work and grabbed my jacket. As I opened the door, I glanced back. Ethan was standing in the middle of the living room, still holding the box, staring at the hallway. He raised his hand and smiled. It took a second to register why it bothered me. His mouth was smiling, sure, but his eyes didn't change. They stayed flat, waiting. I worked late that night. When I got back, the apartment was dark. All of it. No lamp glow under his door, no TV flicker. I flipped the kitchen light on and went straight for the fridge. I was starving. That's when I saw them. Packages of meat. A lot of them. Red, wrapped tight in plastic, stacked neatly on the middle shelf like bricks. Way more than one person would need or want. No labels. No grocery stickers.
I just stood there with the fridge open, the cold air rolling out onto my legs. From down the hall, I heard a sound. Low, wet, like someone clearing their throat but failing. I closed the fridge slowly and took a step toward Ethan's door. The sound changed. Scratching now, uneven, then something like fabric tearing. "Hey," I said, knocking once, then harder. "You okay in there?" It stopped, completely. The silence felt pressed up against the door. A few seconds passed, 10 maybe. "Yes," Ethan said finally. His voice sounded wrong, thick. "I'm changing." "Oh, sorry," I said, already backing away. Yeah, sorry." I locked my bedroom door that night. I told myself it was just because I wasn't used to having someone else there. In the morning, he was gone. His door was open. The room looked untouched. No sheets on the bed, no clothes, just the desk, the chair, and that cardboard box sitting in the middle, like it had been placed there deliberately. The smell was worse in the daylight, metallic, sweet and sour at the same time. I didn't go inside. I went to class. I avoided thinking about the fridge. When I came back that afternoon, 5 of the meat packages were gone. That evening, there was another knock. I knew it was him before I opened the door. Ethan stood there, breathing a little too fast. Next to him was a woman, about my height, same dark hair, same empty eyes. "This is my sister, Lily," he said quickly, like he'd practiced it. She raised her hand and waved. The motion was stiff, delayed. "Hi," I said. She didn't respond. Ethan's eyes flicked past me, down the hall. "You didn't go into my room." It wasn't a question. "No," I said, "I wouldn't." He watched my face, searching for something. Then he nodded and ushered her inside. She kept looking at me as they walked away, her head tilting slightly, like she was studying an object she didn't recognize. I left the apartment and didn't come back until after midnight. At work, I told my coworkers everything. Most of them laughed it off. One of them, Jenna, didn't. People don't just show up like that. Did you check with housing? I figured it was paperwork stuff, delays. She shook her head. Someone from campus went missing last week. They haven't said much, but my cousin's a dispatcher. It's bad. I barely slept. The next morning, I emailed housing. That night, Ethan knocked on my door. "Can we talk?" he asked. I opened it a crack. He sat on the couch without being invited. His movements were careful, measured. "What keeps you here?" he asked. "My lease, school, life?" He nodded. "Important, blending." I stared at him. Blending with what?
He smiled again, wider this time. With you. The next morning, his door was open. I heard a sound I still can't describe without feeling sick. Wet, heavy, like something being dragged across tile. I looked. It was standing there, hunched, pulling skin over itself with clumsy hands. Ethan's face hung wrong on its head, stretched, unfinished. The box was empty at its feet. It turned toward me. I ran. Housing told me there was no record of a new roommate. The police came, then others who didn't introduce themselves. They found a body a week later. They said it had been missing pieces. I still live in that apartment. Sometimes late at night, I hear scratching in the hall, like something trying to remember how doors work.
"That's our set. Thank you for being so loud tonight," I said into the mic, already half turning away as the cheers swelled again. 300 people, maybe a little more. They sounded like 10 times that. I waved, smiled until my cheeks hurt, and jogged down the narrow steps off the stage toward the back hallway. The lights dimmed behind me. The noise softened like a door closing underwater. "Great crowd," Lena said, handing me a bottle of water as I came backstage. "They were really with you." "Yeah," I said, twisting the cap. "Front row knew every lyric. That still throws me." She grinned, pulling her hair into a messy ponytail. "Those are the ones who'll follow you anywhere." Lena had been around since the beginning, 5 years back, my first real gig. Some bar that smelled like old beer and bleach. She'd been bartending, got into it with the owner halfway through my set, quit on the spot. We talked music until closing. After that, she stuck. My career moved faster than hers, and eventually she admitted she liked running things more than standing under lights. I hired her as soon as I could afford to. She did everything: schedules, routes, driving the bus, calming me down when my head got loud. I trusted her without thinking about it. I slung an arm around her shoulder as we walked toward the dressing rooms. Quick cleanup, then pizza, then 2 days off, in that order. She nodded immediately. After the meet and greet. "Oh, groan. We had one tonight?" "Tiny, few groups. Security'll handle it." I ducked into my dressing room and grabbed a random perfume from my bag. Didn't even know what it was. I sprayed, dabbed under my eyes, smoothed my hair until it looked intentionally messy instead of just tired. "That'll do," I muttered to my reflection. I stepped back out and almost collided with someone standing right outside the door. "Oh, sorry," I said automatically. The man looked down at me. Tall, very still, shaved head, pale skin, a few thin cuts on his hands like paper slices that hadn't healed right. "I'm here to escort you," he said. His voice was low, careful. His eyes caught me off guard. Dark in a way that didn't reflect much back. "Security?" I asked. "Yes. Name's Caleb." He held out his hand. I shook it, cold enough to make me flinch. "Sorry, poor circulation." "No worries," I lied, pulling my hand back and wiping it on my jacket. He stepped aside to let me pass, stayed a pace behind me the whole walk, silent. Not like Owen, my usual guard, who hummed or cracked jokes. "Do you know where Owen is tonight?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Family thing," Caleb said. "I'm just covering." When we reached the stage, Lena was already lining people up, giving her usual rules. No grabbing, no lingering, no gifts. Caleb moved to the side, positioning himself where he could see everything. Professional, exactly right. That somehow made me more uneasy. The meet and greet started smoothly. Kids, couples, phones shaking with excitement. I hugged, smiled, crouched down to talk eye to eye with a little girl who told me she wanted a guitar for her birthday. But the whole time, I felt it. Pressure between my back shoulders, like someone leaning in too close. I glanced back once and caught Caleb staring straight at me,
not scanning the room, just me. The last person stepped forward alone, an older woman, silver hair braided down her back, long dress that looked borrowed from another decade. She leaned on a metal cane polished to a mirror shine. "Hi," I said, offering her an arm. She took it gently. Her grip was firm. "You sound beautiful live," she said. Her voice was thin but steady. "Thank you," I said. "What's your name?" She shook her head. "Not important." She leaned closer, too close. "You need to leave," she whispered. "Not later, tonight." I stiffened. "Excuse me?" "You are not safe," she said, eyes flicking past me. "Someone here wants something from you, something violent." I smiled automatically as Lena glanced over. "Okay," I whispered. "Why me?" "Because they've been watching you for years, waiting." My stomach dropped. She went on. "I see a vehicle, large, enclosed. That's where it happens." "The bus?" I whispered. She nodded once, sharp. "Do not get on it." A voice cut in behind us. "Time's up." Caleb stood there, expression blank. The woman squeezed my hand once more. "I've done what I can," she said louder now. "Thank you for the music." He helped her down the steps. She looked back at me once. Pity, not fear. Lena was beside me a second later. "Everything packed? Pizza?" "Yeah," I said too fast. "Just forgot my bag. I'll meet you outside." She studied my face. "You okay?" "Just tired." She hesitated, then nodded. "Caleb, walk her back." My chest tightened. "I'm fine. I really am. Non-negotiable." Lena was already turning away. I walked fast. Caleb followed. No footsteps somehow. I locked myself into the dressing room and leaned against the door, breathing through my mouth. I pulled my pepper spray from my bag, thumbed the safety off. There was a knock. "Miss," Caleb said, "we need to head out." I flung the door open and sprayed him full in the face. He screamed. I screamed. He staggered back, hands up. I ran. Outside, the bus idled. Lena stood by it, phone in hand. "He's not safe. Drive now." She didn't argue. She started the engine. I collapsed on the couch as the bus pulled onto the road. "We'll call the police at the hotel," she said calmly. "You're okay." I nodded, dizzy. Exhaustion hit me all at once. When I woke, it was dark, highway lights flickering past. My wrists burned. They were tied. "Lena!" I croaked. She didn't turn around at first. "Do you know how exhausting it is to build someone else's life?" My stomach dropped. She looked back at me. No warmth, no familiarity. "I gave you everything, and tonight I finally get something back." The bus sped up. I remembered the woman's eyes, and I screamed until my throat gave out. Every family has someone everyone pretends not to dread. The one whose name drops into a conversation and makes the room go quieter. In ours, it was Aunt Margaret. If you're trying to picture her, imagine a person who treated every interaction like a complaint desk. Tight, gray haircut that never moved, mouth permanently set like she'd just tasted something spoiled. She had this talent for finding the weakest person in the room and pressing exactly where it hurt. Once, at a diner, a waiter forgot her lemon slice. She stood up and yelled until his voice cracked and his hands started shaking. She didn't stop then. She never did. When she visited, the air in the house changed. Chairs were wrong. Food was wrong. We were wrong. Too loud, too slow, too stupid. She made my mom cry more than once with a single sentence tossed out like it meant nothing.
I remember my mother locking herself in her bedroom, face red and swollen, while Aunt Margaret sat at the table, poking at her plate, unimpressed. "That diet isn't doing you any favors," she'd say, without even looking up. My dad just stared into his food. I learned early what silence looked like. Still, she came every month. I didn't understand until I got older. She had money, a lot of it, and she held it like a weapon. Everyone knew she'd never spend it on anyone while she was alive, but the hope of what came after kept people polite. When she finally died, no one cried. We didn't even fake it well. Her death was a relief wrapped in something uglier. I told myself I wouldn't think about how it happened, that I'd forget. That didn't work. My therapist says writing it down might help. I don't know if that's true. I just know I'm tired of waking up sweating, swatting at the air. Margaret hated me most. She never hid it. Said I was plain compared to my younger sister, pinched my cheeks too hard, commented on my weight like it was public property. I learned to stay quiet. If I didn't react, she'd move on to someone else. That system broke the day she kicked my dog. He was lying in the grass, old and gentle, tail thumping when anyone came near. She could have stepped around him. There was space. Instead, she kicked him hard enough that he yelped and tried to crawl away. Something in me snapped. I don't remember deciding to move. I remember my hands shaking. I remember seeing my dog's eyes wide and wet, his body tucked in on itself. I pushed her. I didn't know there was a slope behind her. I didn't know how close she was to the edge. She fell fast, rolling, screaming. She hit at the bottom with a sound I still hear sometimes, usually when I'm half asleep. Her leg broke, bent wrong. The shouting started, my parents calling for help, her screaming like an animal. I stood there, empty, holding my dog while everything blurred. The ambulance came, the hospital. She survived, and she never let it go. She couldn't sue a 10-year-old, but she tried anyway. When that failed, she demanded payment, my payment. I was sent to her house every day after school to work it off. Her house sat near a swamp, low and squat, always buzzing with insects. I'd know I was close when the gnats found my arms. She never greeted me, just barked from her chair for me to shut the door. She sat there with her cast propped up like a trophy, drinking glass after glass of red wine, her toes curled on the cushion, pale and claw-like. "Clean," she'd snap. I scrubbed everything, floors, counters, bathroom. My hands cracked and burned from bleach. The smell never left. Wine, cabbage, and something sour underneath. She ate boiled cabbage every day. Watching her spoon it into her mouth made me nauseous for years afterwards. A month of orders, of slaps, of silence. Then summer hit hard, a heat wave that pressed down on everything. The flies came with it, big black ones. They hovered in clouds, buzzing thick enough you could feel it in your teeth. Margaret loved the heat, kept the radiators on, wore sweaters, never opened a window. On my last day, the flies were everywhere. I swatted my way to her door, already counting the minutes until I never had to come back. She wasn't in her chair. That was strange enough to stop me. I heard a sound from the back room, a low hum, steady, too steady. I knocked, called her name. No answer. The sound grew louder as I moved closer, not humming, buzzing. I opened the door. The heat inside hit me like a wave. The curtains were drawn. The room was dark. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw the bed. There she was, or what was left. Flies covered her, crawling, feeding. Her mouth hung open. Her eyes stared through nothing. The smell was unbearable, sweet and rotten, alive. The swarm lifted when I screamed. They came towards me, angry, thick, alive. I ran. A neighbor found me outside screaming and hitting the air. I don't remember much after that, just hands, sirens, my parents' faces when they arrived. They said she died in her sleep, choked. The flies came through an open window. I never went back inside that house. Even now, years later, I sleep with every window shut. I don't care how hot it gets. I still hear it sometimes, that buzzing right near my ears, waiting.
This one happened to Milo, a junior in high school. It was 7th period physics, the last class before spring break. The room buzzed with that pre-holiday tension, backpacks half-zipped, eyes drifting toward the clock, whispers everywhere. No tests, no stress. Just waiting to be free. Their teacher, Mr. Collins, was the type who wore sneakers with his suit. Super relaxed. That day, instead of actual work, he loaded a brand logo quiz on Sporkle. "Let's test your pop culture IQ," he joked. Everyone was into it, laughing, tossing out guesses. Just as Jasmine shouted Nike. It happened. The intercom crackled to life. The principal's voice, panicked. "This is not a drill. Teachers, initiate lockdown. Lock your doors now." The room dropped 10 degrees in an instant. Mr. Collins didn't even blink. He dashed to the door, locked it, shut the blinds, flipped the lights off. Back corner. Now, we crammed behind the lab tables. Heartbeats like drums. 2 minutes passed. Then the humming from the overhead panel shut off. The power was cut. The emergency lights glowed faint red. Everyone looked around, eyes wide, breathing shallow. That's when we heard it screaming. A man's voice, raw and furious, echoing down the hall. Someone yelled something we couldn't make out. Then a slam. Metal lockers. Again. Again. Boom. 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 And then we heard him clear as day. ILLAVERYONEO. FYOU. 2 girls next to Milo burst into tears. Another kid mouthed "What the hell?" But no one spoke out loud. The footsteps grew louder. The slamming came closer. Then our classroom door. B-A-N-G. B-A-E-N-G. B-A-N-G. He started shouting O-P-E-N-T-D-O-O-R-R. O-P-E-E-U-P. It wasn't just noise. There was intention behind it. This guy wanted Ian. One of the crying girls screamed. Mr. Collins held up a hand, silent. Everyone was trembling, some praying under their breath. The pounding lasted maybe 2 minutes. Could have been 10. Milo's whole body felt frozen. At one point, the handle jiggled. Then silence. The footsteps moved down the hall. The screams faded, but no one moved. 10 agonizing minutes later, the intercom buzzed again. The principal's voice returned, shaky but clearer. "The individual has left the immediate area. Stay in place. More information coming." He explained a man, possibly unarmed, possibly not, had walked into the building through the main entrance, assaulted the receptionist, and ran inside. This was before the school had cameras. Security? Minimal. Staff had searched every hall, closet, classroom. Nothing. No sign of him. Classes were told to resume, doors locked. No bathroom breaks, no passes. Just wait. But the scariest part, that night, a janitor, doing a sweep, found a man asleep in a storage closet near the gym. Word spread fast. He had a .44 Magnum in his coat pocket. Rumor is, the janitor had startled him, maybe opened the door too loud, and by the time police arrived, he was gone. Nobody knows if he was ever caught. And to this day, Milo still checks that closet every time he passes it, just in case. At Winford Middle, lunch is split. 6th graders eat first, then the upper grades. This happened in early October, gloomy, damp. One of those weirdly quiet days when the clouds hang too low. Kylie, a 7th grader, was standing in line at the outdoor snack kiosk. halfway through deciding between pizza sticks or nachos, when it hit 4 loud bangs in the distance. Everyone froze. At first, she thought it was thunder, maybe something falling from a truck nearby. But then kids started screaming. That's when security came tearing across the quad, yelling at everyone to get inside now. Anyone holding food had to toss it. Kylie and her friends were pushed into the Performing Arts Center, along with over 100 other kids. Teachers slammed doors, pulled curtains, and stood silently by each exit. No one knew what was going on, but everyone knew it was bad. The back of the theater was all glass, with long curtains that almost never got used until today. Faculty dragged them across in silence, blocking the view of the field and street. Kylie's friend, Emmett, whispered to a teacher. When he came back, his face had lost all color. "There's a guy," he said quietly. "Lives across from the tennis courts. He's got himself locked inside his house. Said he'll shoot anyone who comes near. Police, neighbors, whoever." Kylie blinked. "What does that have to do with us?" He was watching the school earlier, just standing outside, like he was picking someone. It got worse. "He's also on the registry," Emmett added. "One of those registries." You know, the entire row of kids went silent. They sat in the darkened auditorium for nearly an hour. No phones. No updates. Just the quiet dread of not knowing and the constant awareness that something dangerous was so close. Eventually, staff escorted them out, one group at a time, keeping students pressed against the walls as they moved. Kylie learned more later from her neighbor. Turns out, the man lived next door to her classmate Nora, who had a story to share. She said the previous Halloween, she saw him in his upstairs window. He was pressing his hand against the glass. His other hand? It was writing something. In blood, "Don't come near. I see you." Everyone thought it was a Halloween prank. Now, no one thinks that anymore. Liam, 23, had just graduated with a degree in IT and landed a contract job back at his old high school maintaining servers and handling tech requests. It felt nostalgic being back, but better no homework, just work. The school basement was cluttered, dark, and always cold, but there was one saving grace: a private tech office tucked behind storage shelves. It had 2 desks, a coffee machine, a fan, and an old flat screen on the wall. Compared to the stifling classrooms upstairs, it was practically luxury. That day, Liam was alone. His co-workers Noah and Caleb were helping admin staff upstairs. Liam had the office to himself, munching on a cold sandwich and half watching a YouTube video on his second screen. Then his phone rang. Front office. "Liam, lockdown. Now, someone may be armed. Stay where you are. Lights off." Click. The office had no door, just a wide entryway facing the hallway of the basement. The main basement door didn't lock. Liam's heart started racing. He turned off his monitor, silenced his phone, and sat in total darkness. No idea what was going on upstairs. No sounds. No news. He texted Noah and Caleb. "What's happening?" No reply. 20 minutes passed. Nothing but his own breathing and the low hum of the server rack. Then the basement door creaked open. Footsteps. Not slow. Not cautious. Running. Liam jumped from his chair and dropped to the floor, crawling under his desk. His phone buzzed in his hand, a message, but he didn't dare look. Heavy footsteps entered the office. No lights came on. Just silence. Liam held his breath. Then someone whispered, "It's okay. I'm just hiding down here with you." A man stepped into view, dressed in a red flannel and dark jeans. Older, calm. Liam barely choked out, "Who are you?" The man smiled slightly. "Just a parent. Came to pick up my kid. A teacher told me to hide, but something felt off." His voice, the way he looked around like he didn't belong. Liam's phone buzzed again. Liam glanced down at the screen. A message from Noah. "Dude, Stay hidden. Guy W/gunshot, Mr. Kessler. Red shirt, black cap. DUNOTCOMEUP. Liam froze. He slowly looked up. The man in front of him was wearing a red flannel, a black baseball cap. The man stared back. Something wrong? Liam bolted. He ran out of the office. Up the stairs, a shot rang out behind him. The sound of a bullet ricocheting off metal echoed through the stairwell. He didn't stop. When he burst through the basement door, 2 officers were already there, weapons drawn. They tackled the man the second he reached the exit.
The first message came in at 12:07 a.m., which is already a bad time for anyone to be interested in a used bread knife. Buy. Where pickup. Address. That was it. No hello, no question about the blade, no is it still available, the polite lie everyone tells before they ghost you forever. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed, then tapped it awake again, like the words might rearrange into something normal if I blinked hard enough. Outside my bedroom window, the streetlight on Maple Avenue buzzed with that tired electrical hum that makes everything feel slightly wrong. My apartment smelled like stale beer and the lavender plug-in I kept buying because it made me feel like an adult who had their life under control. I did not have my life under control. I replied anyway, because when you're broke, you answer the weird texts, you answer the scams, you answer the guy who offers you $30 for a thing you listed for $10, and can you ship today, bro? I'll cash app you the extra for your trouble. Hi, I typed, making myself sound normal. You mean the bread knife? I'm in Wadsworth. I can meet in town. The typing bubble popped up immediately, like they were hovering over the keyboard waiting for me to exist. Address. No punctuation, no apology, just that, like a hand held out, palm up, demanding. I set my phone down on the comforter and listened to the refrigerator cycle on in the kitchen. The motor rattled as if something inside was loose, ice tray, shelf, maybe a screw, like it wanted me to remember I was living in my grandmother's old place, in my grandmother's old life, and the whole thing was held together by stubbornness and duct tape. On instinct, I checked the profile picture. A woman, maybe 50-ish, big hair in a way that suggested hairspray and surrender. She stood behind striped wallpaper, beige and a sickly gold that reminded me of nicotine-stained offices. The photo was grainy, taken under yellow light. Her mouth hung open slightly, as if she'd been caught mid-breath or mid-word or mid-swallow. There was something about her eyes that made my skin prickle, though it could have been the low resolution making her pupils look too dark. Her name was Deb. Not Deborah, not Debbie, just Deb, like the account had been created by someone who'd heard human beings had names, and this was close enough. I typed back the first lie that came to mind. Sorry, it's sold. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Then nothing. For a minute, I sat there feeling ridiculous, like I'd just gotten creeped out by an overzealous yard sale mom. I'd seen worse on the site, way worse. I'd dealt with men who flirted with the Craigslist confidence of someone who'd never been punched. I'd dealt with people who insisted I'd drive across town in exchange for exposure or a half-empty bottle of vape juice. I dealt with a guy who traded a live snake for my old PlayStation. Deb didn't even crack the top 10. I rolled onto my side, pulled the blanket up, and tried to sleep. And then my phone buzzed again. Buy. Where pickup? Address. Same account. Same words. Same blank insistence. The hook sank in deep right then. Not fear, not yet. Something smaller and more annoying. The sense of being watched by someone who didn't care about the rules of watching. Like a toddler staring unblinking at you in a grocery store aisle while you're trying to pick cereal. And you can't say anything because it's a toddler, but your spine still tightens. I blocked the account and told myself to stop being dramatic. That's how it starts, by the way. Not with screaming or shadows. It starts with you convincing yourself you're dramatic, that your nerves are just frayed, that the world isn't actually getting weirder, you're just getting tired. If my life had been better, I would have shrugged it off and never thought about it again. But my life at that time was a stack of bad decisions balanced on top of each other like cheap plates at a diner. One wrong move, and the whole thing would slide to the floor in a greasy, loud mess. 6 months earlier, I'd been fired from a bar and grill off Route 18 because I showed up late too many times, and on the last day, I showed up late with a black eye, smelling like regret. To be fair, the black eye was not entirely my fault. There had been a birthday, there had been tequila, there had been a guy outside the metro station who didn't like the way my friend looked at him. There had been fists and pavement, and that sudden quiet moment in a fight where you realize you are not in a movie and you are very breakable. My boss, a man named Chuck, who wore his hair in a comb-over that looked like a lost animal, took one look at my face and said, "Go home, Evan." I tried to say something witty, like, "You can't fire me, I quit," but my brain was moving through molasses. I managed, "Yeah." Then I tripped over my own shoelace and went down hard in front of the register. It would have been funny if it hadn't been me. 2 weeks later, my grandma Ruth died in her sleep, 92 years old, stubborn as winter. She'd raised me half the time because my mom worked doubles, and my dad existed in the same vague way comets exist. You hear about them, you don't see them when you need them. Ruth left me her apartment, 2 bedrooms in a peeling brick building that used to be called a complex when the sign was new. Now the sign was missing letters, and the place smelled like old carpet and the hopeful beginnings of mold. But she also left behind a life's worth of things: boxes of dishes, old clocks, ceramic figurines that looked like they'd been designed by someone who hated children, a vacuum cleaner that weighed as much as a small planet, a stack of magazines from the 70s that smelled like dust and perfume. I couldn't do anything with the apartment until the paperwork went through. Probate is a fun game where the universe says, "Congratulations on your loss, now wait." I also had debt, a medical bill, 2 months behind on my car insurance, a payday loan I took out with the same enthusiasm I'd once reserved for shots of Fireball. I needed money, and I needed it now. So I did what everyone does when they run out of better ideas. I started selling things on the internet. The app was called Yardly, bright yellow logo, friendly name, like it was a cute little neighborhood swap meet and not a digital Hunger Games where you fought strangers for $20. At first it was my stuff, old video games, action figures I'd kept because I was sentimental, and also because throwing things away felt like admitting time was real. Model cars, a box of trading cards that made me briefly consider whether my greatest skill in life was being a careful child. Then it became Ruth's stuff. Her china set, her kitchen knives,
her weird decorative plates that had paintings of barns on them, like barns were an emotion. I took pictures on my cheap phone, filled out the mandatory fields, and wrote descriptions like I was applying for a job as assistant to the Department of Used Toasters. Vintage alarm clock, works, probably haunted. Set of dishes, minor wear, holds food. Vacuum cleaner, heavy, will outlive us all. People bought things. To my surprise, there were folks out there who genuinely wanted a 70-pound vacuum because they don't make them like that anymore. There were collectors, nostalgia freaks, people furnishing their first apartments with whatever they could afford. And then there were the other ones, the ones who wanted my address. Not where can we meet, not what's a safe public place, just address. Usually it came with threats disguised as friendliness. I'll come now, give me address. I'm already near you, send address. Don't waste my time, address. You learn to ignore, you learn to block. You learn that the internet is full of people who are lonely and angry and would like to take a bite out of you just to see if you bleed. That's how Deb seemed like a big deal at first, until she became a pattern. A week after the bread knife, I listed an old blazer I hadn't worn since my cousin's wedding. It was navy blue, too big in the shoulders, and smelled faintly like the cologne I'd worn back when I believed cologne could fix insecurity. The first message was normal.
Hi. What size is it? A guy named Mark with a selfie and a pickup truck. Fine. The second message popped up at 1:14 a.m. Jacket smell. I frowned, checked the account. The profile picture was a man, maybe 35, maybe 50, hard to tell. Thick eyebrows, eyes open wide as if he'd just seen something that made him forget how eyelids worked. He stood in front of the same striped wallpaper, same yellow light. Name, Art. His next message arrived before I could answer. I want if smell. I stared at the words and felt something sour crawl up the back of my throat. I tried to laugh it off. Okay, I told the empty room, so now I've got the jacket sniffer. Great, add it to the resume. I typed, it's been in a closet, smells like closet. The typing bubble appeared. Address. There it was again, like a door slamming. I didn't answer. I blocked Art. I blocked Mark too, just because I was suddenly in a mood. Then, over the next few days, more messages came. Different listings, different names, same wallpaper. Shelley wanted my old cassette player. Nate wanted my toolbox. Rick wanted my grandmother's porcelain cat collection, which honestly, good, please take them. They made me feel judged. All of them asked for my address with the same flat urgency, as if address was less a question and more a command that made the air around it bend. Some wrote like toddlers. Some wrote full sentences in a way that made them seem almost normal, but the profile pictures were always the same in the ways that mattered. Striped wallpaper, yellow light, the same too-close camera angle, faces that didn't feel like faces. And every time I looked at those pictures too long, I got the same sensation, a cold slide down my spine, like an ice cube tucked under my shirt. It wasn't just fear, it was revulsion, like my body recognized something my mind didn't want to name.
I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a scam ring. Maybe it was a troll group. Maybe it was one guy with a weird wallpaper fetish running multiple accounts because he got off on creeping out sellers. The internet is a carnival. You can always find a booth labeled "People Who Shouldn't Have Wi-Fi." Still, the repetition gnawed at me. It got worse the night someone hijacked my neighbor's account. His name was Gene, 50-something, sold refurbished phones and laptops out of his garage. He'd fixed my screen once for a case of beer and a promise not to tell anyone he'd done it without a license. He had a big belly and a laugh that sounded like he'd been born mid-joke. When my phone finally died, the cheap one I'd been using like a lifeline, I went to Yardley and messaged Gene. "Hey man, you got any phones? Mine just took a dive." His reply came immediately. "No phone." That was weird. Gene always responded with at least a "hey bud" and 5 unnecessary emojis. I wrote back, "Dang, if you get one, let me know." Another reply, "I have slab." I paused. Slab? Gene sold electronics, not slabs. "What kind of slab?" I typed, already amused in that grim way you get when the world is being ridiculous and you're too tired to fight it. The reply made my stomach tighten.
I bring slab, address. There it was. The word that had started haunting my little hustle like a curse. Address. I clicked Gene's profile. The picture had changed. No more camo jacket and big grin, and fish held out like a trophy. Now it was a bearded man in a suit and tie, staring straight into the camera with a polite expression that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him, striped wallpaper, yellow light. Name, Boris, not Gene. My hands went cold so fast I almost dropped the phone. My mind did this quick, frantic inventory. I had messaged Gene. I was seeing Boris. Gene's account had been taken. Someone who wanted my address now had access to my messages with Gene. I scrolled up through the chat. The earlier messages with Gene were gone, like the thread had been wiped clean and replaced with this new, wrong conversation. My throat felt tight. I took a breath that tasted like metal. I blocked the account. Then I sat on the edge of Ruth's old bed, same quilt, same squeaky frame, and stared at the wall until my eyes burned. I couldn't check on Gene. I didn't have his number anymore. It had been in my phone, and my phone was dead. I didn't know his address. We'd met in parking lots and driveways. That's how these little town deals work. You trade convenience for safety and hope your instincts aren't broken. I spent the day half expecting my doorbell to ring, half expecting a knock, half expecting some smiling stranger to ask for a slab and step inside like they belonged there. Nothing happened. The next day, I decided I was done. No more listings, no more strangers, no more profile pictures with that wallpaper that now made me feel itchy, like I'd brushed against fiberglass. I would find a real job. I would be normal. I would go back to being broke in a way that didn't involve digital ghosts. But of course, the universe loves timing. And that was when my life did the thing where it kicks you in the ribs while you're already on the ground. A week after my phone died, I bought a used one, another cheap lifeline, delivered in a dented box with someone else's fingerprints on it.
I spent the afternoon logging into accounts, resetting passwords, trying to remember who I was in a digital sense. That night, feeling reckless and desperate, I listed 3 things as a last attempt to scrape together enough money to float until I could get hired somewhere. Ruth's old television, a toolbox, and a drill set. I told myself, one last round, one last sail. I fell asleep with the phone on my chest like a security blanket. When I woke up, I had messages, not 1, not 2, 7.
Different names, different items, same vibe. One of them was almost polite. "Hi, Evan. Is the drill still available?" Profile picture, a man in a vest and tie with a mustache that looked pasted on. Striped wallpaper behind him, yellow light. Another, "Hello, interested in the TV? Where are you located?" Profile picture, a woman in a floral blouse, hair too stiff, mouth slightly open, striped wallpaper, yellow light. I sat up in bed, heart thumping, and looked around the room as if the wallpaper could somehow appear here too, like it was contagious. I tapped the polite message and stared at the typing bubble that immediately appeared. I didn't answer, I just watched. 3 dots. 3 dots. Then the message arrived. "Address, please." It was the same demand, wearing a paper mask of courtesy. My hands shook, not violently, not movie style, just enough to make me fumble the phone. I was about to block the account when something happened that changed everything. A photo flashed in the chat. It was there for maybe half a second. Then it vanished, like whoever sent it realized they'd made a mistake and yanked it back. But half a second is enough for a brain to grab an image and staple it to the inside of your skull. I saw the striped wallpaper from a wider angle, like someone had taken a picture of the room instead of a selfie. The light was still yellow, hanging from the ceiling, a bare bulb, dim and jaundiced. In front of the wall, someone stood ready to be photographed. It was dressed like a man, suit jacket, white shirt, but below the waist, nothing. Not legs in the normal way, just gray, mottled shapes ending in black socks, like someone had shoved a corpse into clothes and propped it upright with something metallic. A frame, a brace, a stand. And the face. The face was the worst part. It was orange, in a way skin shouldn't be, like it had been soaked in old smoke for years. The mouth was stretched in a tight, painful grin. The eyes were open, but they were not looking at the camera. They were staring past it, into whatever was holding them there. My stomach flipped. A thin sound came out of my throat, half laugh, half gag. I dropped the phone onto the bed as if it had turned hot. For a full minute, I sat there, breathing hard, trying to tell myself what I'd seen wasn't real, that it was a prank, that it was a Halloween prop, that the lighting had made it look worse. But my body didn't care about logic. My body had already decided this was wrong. My skin had already gone cold. The hairs on my arms were standing like little warning flags. I wiped my palms on my pajama pants, picked the phone back up, and blocked every account that had messaged me. Then I deleted my listings. Then I deleted my profile. I went into the settings and tried to delete the app itself, but my fingers kept slipping because my hands were sweating now. When the app finally disappeared from my screen, I felt a wave of relief so strong it made me dizzy. I told myself it was over.
I told myself I'd pulled the plug, and for a little while, it seemed like I had. The days got quieter. I went to job interviews that ended with, "We'll let you know," which is code for, "We will not let you know." I picked up a few odd jobs, moving someone's couch, mowing a lawn, helping a guy install a sink, and pretending I knew what I was doing. At night, I slept like a rock. Then, the dreams started. In the dreams, I was always in a room with striped wallpaper, always beige and sickly gold, always under a dim yellow bulb that lit nothing but itself, like a lighthouse for the damned. I sat on something low, like a stool, and around me, the darkness moved. Hands. Dozens of hands, slapping and sliding over the floor, bodies shifting and rustling as if wrapped in clothes that didn't fit. The sound was like a pile of laundry trying to breathe. They wanted me. That was the only clear thing. Not to kill me quickly, not to scare me for fun, to take me. I'd wake up with my heart pounding and the smell of something sour in my nose, like a damp basement mixed with old meat. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, telling myself dreams are just your brain cleaning house, that it was stress, that I was overreacting. But then the smell lingered faintly in the air of my apartment, as if the dream had rubbed itself onto the room. A month after I deleted Yardley, I finally got a job offer.
It wasn't glamorous. It was driving for a small taxi company in town, Wadsworth Cab, which mostly did runs to the grocery store for old folks and late-night pickups from the bar for people who'd promised themselves they had stopped doing this after 30. The owner, a guy named Don, called me and said, "We need someone. The current driver's off. Wrecked 2 cars already. I'm cutting him loose." "How soon?" I asked, trying not to sound desperate. "Tonight," Don said. "Switch at midnight at the lot over by the old industrial park. You know where that is?" I didn't, but I said yes anyway, because of course I did. Don gave me the other driver's number and told me to message him so we could meet and exchange keys and paperwork. I did. The driver's name was Kyle. His profile picture in the messaging app was a blurry shot of a dashboard and a pair of hands holding a steering wheel. Normal enough. I wrote, "Hey, I'm Evan. Don said we're switching at midnight. I'll be there." No reply. I shrugged it off. People are flaky. People are tired. People don't answer because they're busy being the main character in their own mess. At 11:15 p.m., I left my apartment and started walking. I didn't have a car anymore. Long story involving the electric scooter I'd used to get to interviews and a parked SUV that had been minding its own business until I introduced my face to its hood. My arm had been in a sling for weeks afterward, and the repair bill had eaten whatever savings I had managed to scrape together. So I walked. The route took me past the funeral home, one of those places that tries to look comforting with fake lanterns and potted mums, but still feels like a mouth you're about to step into. Then down a gravel path between 2 empty lots where weeds grew tall and brittle, rattling in the wind like dry bones. The industrial park was mostly dark at that hour, just a few security lights glowing near warehouses. The air smelled like cold metal and damp asphalt. Somewhere a truck idled, its engine a low growl in the distance. I found the taxi lot, a fenced area with a small office that was locked. A couple of cars sat inside under dim lights. No people. I checked my phone. 11:59, midnight. I sat on a concrete barrier and waited. Time did that stretchy thing it does at night when you're alone and your brain decides to start replaying every bad memory you've ever had. I watched a documentary on my phone with the volume low. I smoked 2 cigarettes I couldn't afford. I checked my messages. Nothing from Kyle. At 12:45, I called him. It rang until voicemail. At 1:10, I called again. Voicemail. At 1:30, I stood up and started walking home. I was halfway back, cutting through the gravel path between the empty lots, when my phone buzzed. A message from Kyle. Relief hit me first, hot and fast, then irritation, then that small nagging unease that had learned to live in the back of my head like a tenant who never pays rent. The message read, "Don't tell me you're at the lot." I stopped walking. The gravel shifted under my shoes. I typed, "Yeah, I was. You didn't show." The typing bubble appeared immediately. Then the reply, "I crashed." My stomach sank. I typed, "Are you okay?" The bubble. The reply, "I brought slab." I just stood there, staring at the words, trying to make them mean something else, trying to make slab a typo, trying to make it a normal thing a normal person would say after crashing a car. My phone buzzed again. A photo. I opened it before I could stop myself. It was the inside of a taxi, or what used to be. Metal twisted like crumpled foil, glass shattered, the steering wheel bent at a sick angle, and there, in the driver's window, a chunk of a face hung outward, jawbone, teeth, a single eye staring through blood and debris like a marble lodged in a broken toy. The image was horrifying, yes, but what made my throat close was the arm. An arm extended out of the broken window, holding the phone that had taken the picture. The arm was wrong, too pale, skin pulled tight in a way that made it look like it had been peeled and put back on without care. The fingers were curled around the phone with deliberate steadiness, as if the thing attached to them had practiced this motion. A second message arrived. Car still drives. A third. I drive to you. My legs moved before my mind caught up. I ran. I don't run. I'm not a runner. Running has always been something other people do in movies or on treadmills or away from consequences. I have avoided running my entire adult life with the same dedication I avoid phone calls. But my body didn't ask permission. I ran down the gravel path, lungs burning as cold air sliced into them. My side started to cramp almost immediately, a tight, twisting pain that made each breath feel like a punishment. The weeds slapped my legs, stones shifted under my shoes, trying to turn my ankles. Behind me, somewhere far off, a faint sound rose. An engine. A rough, uneven roar like something trying to breathe through a clogged throat. Headlights appeared at the far end of the gravel path, 2 dim yellow beams that didn't seem to cast light so much as announce presence, like eyes opening in the dark. I ran harder. The cramp in my side deepened, nausea rising with it. My breath turned into a ragged wheeze, my heart hammered like it was trying to escape. I cut through a parking lot, hopped a low fence behind a soccer field slick with frost. The grass felt wet and brittle underfoot. My shoes slid, my knees screamed.
The yellow headlights followed, bobbing in the distance, never close enough for me to hear tires clearly, but always there, always coming. I reached my neighborhood like a man washing up on shore. Streetlights buzzed overhead, houses sat quiet, windows dark. My apartment building loomed ahead, ugly and familiar like a bad habit. I fumbled my keys so badly I dropped them once. When I finally jammed the right one into the lock, my hands were shaking so hard the metal scraped. The door gave. I stumbled inside and slammed it behind me. I bolted up the stairs to the second floor, each step a jolt through my legs. I got to my door, unlocked it, shoved myself in, and threw the deadbolt, then the chain, then the second lock Ruth had installed because she believed in redundancy the way some people believe in God. I pressed my forehead against the door and listened. Silence. No footsteps, no engine, no knock. Just my own breathing, loud and wet in my ears. My phone buzzed. I looked at it like it was a snake. Another message from Kyle. I'm coming up. Something in me cracked. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet way, like a thread snapping inside your chest. I slid down the wall and crawled under Ruth's old bed, because in that moment I was 5 years old and hiding from thunder, and I didn't have the energy to pretend I was brave. I lay on the floor, cheek pressed to dusty linoleum, and tried to make myself small enough to disappear. My phone buzzed again. It smells like you supposed to.
And then, as if the text had opened a valve, the smell hit. Not subtle, not imaginary. A sudden, thick stench seeped into the apartment like fog, sweet rot mixed with damp earth like a grave after rain. It made my eyes water. It made my stomach lurch. I slapped a hand over my mouth to keep from gagging. Then came the sound, a heavy thud against my door. Not a polite knock, not a fist, something blunt, something with weight behind it. Thud. The door rattled in its frame. Thud. Again, harder. The wood groaned, the chain lock jingled. I stared at the underside of the bed slats, heart hammering, and waited for the door to split, for the frame to crack, for those yellow lights to shine through the hallway and spill into my home like poison. The thuds came in a rhythm, almost patient, as if whatever was on the other side was counting. Thud, thud, thud. Then, silence. The smell lingered a moment longer, thick and wet. Then it began to fade. I held my breath, listening. No footsteps, no dragging, no engine. Just the faint buzz of the hallway light outside my apartment and the distant hum of someone's TV through the wall. My phone buzzed again. I didn't look. I didn't want to see what it said. Then, gently, a different sound. A small, hesitant knock. Tap, tap. A voice, trembling and familiar. Evan? It was my neighbor, Mr. Harlan, from across the hall. Old guy with sagging cheeks and a perpetual expression like someone had just told him the price of eggs. Evan, you home? For a second, I didn't believe it. I thought the thing outside had learned my neighbor's voice. I thought it was mimicking. But then Mr. Harlan coughed, a wet human cough, and said, I need you to open the door, please.
I crawled out from under the bed like I'd aged 10 years in 5 minutes. My legs were shaky, my throat burned. I crept to the door and peered through the pee-hole. Mr. Harlan stood there in his robe and slippers, his thin white hair sticking up like he'd been grabbed by sleep and shaken. His eyes were wide in a way I'd never seen before, wide and glossy, like he'd seen a car accident up close. Behind him, the hallway was empty. No yellow headlights, no corpse taxi driver, no rot smell. Just Mr. Harlan, breathing hard, looking like he might fall over. I unlocked the chain just enough to crack the door. "What?" I whispered. He didn't look at me at first. His gaze was fixed on something lower, on the door itself, on the outside of it. "Evan," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "I'm so sorry." "What are you talking about?" I whispered. My voice shook, which made me furious at myself. "Did you see someone out here? Did you—" He swallowed hard and lifted a trembling hand, pointing. I opened the door wider, and I saw it. Someone had bolted a stone slab to my door.
Not a small thing, not a prank-sized plaque, a full headstone, gray granite, polished on the front, rough on the back. It had been attached with thick metal brackets, screws drilled straight through the wood like they'd been installed by someone who did this for a living. My door sagged under the weight. Carved into the stone in clean professional lettering was my name, Evan Matthews, 1998-2026. Underneath, smaller, beloved friend, taken too soon. And at the bottom, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, happy owner of the slab. There was a photo affixed to the stone beneath the dates, a glossy print. Me, standing in my hallway, smiling like an idiot, with 2 men beside me in suits. I recognized them immediately. Boris from Jean's hijacked account, Art the jacket sniffer. Their eyes in the photo were too wide, their smiles too tight. Behind all of us, faintly visible through the open doorway, the striped wallpaper of some other place, wrong place, like the photo had been stitched together from different realities. My knees went weak. I grabbed the edge of the stone, feeling cold granite under my fingertips, and the urge to vomit rose hard. Mr. Harlan's hand rested on my shoulder, light, hesitant, like he wasn't sure I was real. "I saw them," he whispered, "earlier, down the hall, carrying it. They looked," his voice cracked, "they looked like they'd been through a fire." "Why didn't you call the cops?" I heard myself ask, but it sounded far away, like it came from someone else's mouth. Mr. Harlan shook his head slowly, eyes fixed on the dates as if they were a prophecy. I thought," he swallowed, "I thought you were already gone." The hallway tilted, the carved numbers swam. I couldn't process how the stone got there, how they drilled into my door without waking anyone, how they knew my full name, how they got a photo of me standing in a hallway I didn't remember posing in. Mr. Harlan squeezed my shoulder once, like a funeral gesture, then stepped back. "I'm sorry," he said again, and this time it sounded like the way people say it at wakes when they don't know what else to offer. Then he retreated into his apartment and closed the door. Click. I stood alone in the hallway with my headstone. For a long time, I just stared. The building felt different. The air felt thicker, like it had absorbed the smell of rot and decided to keep it as a souvenir. My phone buzzed. I didn't want to look, but my hand moved anyway, almost without permission.
A message from an unknown number. Do not remove slab. Slab stays with you. I stared at it until the letters blurred. I tried to do the same thing. The next morning, I called the police. I explained, stumbling over words, that someone had attached a headstone to my door. I did not mention the taxi photo. I did not mention the wallpaper room. I did not mention the smell. I knew how that would sound. The officer who arrived was a young guy with a buzz cut and the tired eyes of someone who'd already seen too much for his age. He stood in the hallway, looked at the stone, and made a face like he'd bitten into something sour. "Jesus," he muttered, that's a lot of effort for a prank." "It's not a prank," I said, and immediately regretted how desperate it sounded. He crouched to examine the brackets and screws. "You got enemies?" "I've got debt," I said. "Does that count?" He gave me a look that was almost sympathetic, then stood. "We'll file a report. We can try to get it removed." "Try?" He hesitated. It's secured. Might need a contractor or your landlord." "My landlord's allergic to effort," I said, because sarcasm was the only thing keeping me from screaming. The officer took photos, asked questions, wrote things down, then left with a promise that felt like a Band-Aid on a gunshot. No one came to remove the slab. I called a handyman I'd used once to fix my bathroom sink. He answered, listened quietly, and hung up without saying a word. I called a locksmith. He asked for my address. I gave it because at that point, what was the harm? There was a pause. Then, "I'm sorry," and he hung up too. I started noticing things. Small things at first. The way the mailman hesitated at my door, then left my mail on the floor like he didn't want to touch the handle. The way my upstairs neighbor, a single mom named Tina, avoided eye contact in the stairwell. The way Mr. Harlan crossed himself when he saw me, like he was warding off something. I tried to talk to Tina. "Hey," I said one afternoon when she came down the stairs with a laundry basket. "Do you know what's going on?" She froze, her eyes flicking to the headstone bolted to my door. Her face went pale. You shouldn't be out here." "What?" I let out a humorless laugh. "It's my hallway." She shook her head, clutching the basket like a shield. "I saw the flowers," she whispered. I thought you were dead." The word tasted like rust. Tina's eyes welled. She backed away slowly, as if sudden movement might spook me. "I'm sorry," she said, and hurried down the stairs, nearly tripping. That evening, I found flowers outside my door. A cheap bouquet from the grocery store, plastic wrap crinkling, a little sympathy card tucked into it. From Deb. The next morning, there was a wreath, black ribbon, fake lilies, a tag. From Art. By the end of the week, my hallway looked like the entrance to a wake. Candles appeared, thick white ones that burned even when no one was there to light them. pine branches scattered along the baseboards like someone was trying to purify the air. Someone left a folded program on my doormat, printed on glossy paper, announcing services for me at the funeral home. It listed a date, 2 days from now. I took it to the funeral home in a fury, marched inside and slapped it on the counter. The receptionist, a woman with perfect hair and a voice like sugar, looked at it, then at me, then back at it. "Oh," she said softly. "What do you mean, oh?" I snapped. "This is fake. Someone's messing with me." Her eyes flicked to the slab visible through the glass door behind me. Her smile tightened. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice had shifted, becoming careful. I can't discuss this." "What do you mean, discuss? I'm standing right here." She swallowed. "We have records," she said, barely audible. "We have paperwork." "What paperwork?" She whispered something that made my stomach drop. "Certificate. Death certificate." I laughed because the alternative was falling apart in front of her. "Okay," I said, voice too loud. "Sure, great, love that for me. I'll just go back to my apartment and be dead quietly." When I tried to buy a bus ticket to Cleveland, the woman at the counter squinted at her computer screen and said, "Sir, it says here you're deceased." When I went to the bank to ask for a small loan, the manager blinked at his monitor and said, "This is unusual." When I called Don at the taxi company to ask what the hell had happened with the job, he answered on the second ring, silent for a long moment, then said, "Evan? That's not funny." "I'm not joking. I was there. The driver texted me. Don cut me off. "Evan Matthews died," he said, and his voice had that shaky certainty people get when they're clinging to an official story because it's easier than the truth. I heard it. I saw the notice. "What notice?" Don exhaled. "Look, man, I'm sorry. I gotta go." He hung up. Each door closed gently in my face. Each conversation ended with the same 2 words, spoken like a prayer or a warning. "I'm sorry." I stopped going out. I stopped answering calls. I sat inside my apartment with the headstone on my door and listened to the building breathe. At night, I heard movement in the hallway, not footsteps. Crawling, a soft, wet sliding sound, fabric rustling, hands slapping against concrete. Sometimes I heard whimpering, thin, mournful sobs, like someone grieving in the dark. I pressed my ear to the door once, against cold granite, and listened.
A voice whispered from the other side, so faint I thought I imagined it. "Address." I stumbled back like I'd been shoved. The dreams got worse. In them, I was in my apartment, but it was pitch black, and outside my window, the streetlights were those same dim yellow points that illuminated nothing, as if the world had been reduced to symbols. I could hear the bodies in the hallway, crawling, shuffling, rustling. Their hands slid over the door, searching for the handle. In the dream, I always held the handle from the inside, gripping until my knuckles ached, keeping them out. At first, I was whole. Then, one night, my leg was gone. I looked down in the dream and saw nothing but a blunt absence, like a missing piece of furniture. Panic surged, but I still reached the handle. Another night, the other leg vanished.
I dragged myself across the floor with my arms, nails scraping, teeth clenched to reach the door. Another night, one of my arms was gone. I woke up screaming into my pillow, sweating through my sheets, the smell of damp earth thick in my nose. In the mornings, I found more wreaths, more tags, more names. From Nate, from Rick, from Boris. Some were handwritten, some were printed. All of them felt like signatures on a contract I hadn't agreed to. I tried to pry the slab off myself once. I took a hammer and a screwdriver and went at the brackets like a man tearing at a trap. The first screw didn't budge. The second one did, just slightly, enough to make my hope flare. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Stop. The hallway light flickered. The air thickened. And from the other side of my door, I heard a sound that made my blood turn to ice. A soft, amused exhale, like someone smiling in the dark. I dropped the hammer. I backed away. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on Ruth's bed with my phone in my hand, staring at the wall, listening for the crawl in the hallway. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A photo. I didn't want to open it. I knew I shouldn't, but the part of me that used to rubberneck at car accidents, the part that believed if you look, you can prepare, made my thumb move. The photo showed a room. Striped wallpaper, yellow light, bare bulb. There were people lined up against the wall like they were waiting to take turns for a picture. Some had suits, some had dresses, some had uniforms, work shirts, aprons, a construction vest. All of them stood too straight, like mannequins on invisible supports. Their faces were wrong in different ways, too orange, too pale, too stretched, eyes too wide, mouths too fixed. In the center of the room, closer to the camera, stood someone new. Me, or something shaped like me. My hair was flattened like I'd been dragged through water. My skin was gray. My mouth was slightly open in the same slack way Deb's had been. Behind me, a metal brace held me upright. I wore the blazer I listed months ago.
Welcome. My chest tightened until I thought I might pass out. My phone buzzed again. Address confirmed. And then, as if someone had finally remembered to include manners, thank you. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. I sat there shaking, hands clenched into fists so tight my nails bit into my palms. Outside, the streetlight on Maple Avenue buzzed, steady and indifferent. In the hallway, something began to crawl, slowly, patiently, closer. I stared at my door, the granite slab bolted to it, my name carved into stone like a joke that had gone too far, and I understood something with a clarity that made me nauseous. This wasn't about scaring me. It wasn't about selling things. It wasn't even about my address. It was about making the world agree I was gone. Because once everyone believes you're dead, you're not protected by their rules anymore. No one calls your phone. No one opens doors for you. No one sees you in line at the store. You become something that can slip through cracks, something that can be moved, stored, listed, owned. A soft sound came from the other side of the door. Not a thud this time, not a knock.
A fingernail dragging slowly along granite. Skrrr. Then another. Skrrr. Like someone tracing the carved letters of my name. I pressed my back to the far wall, heart pounding, sweat cold on my skin. The hallway light flickered again, and behind the granite, behind the wood, behind the deadbolt and chain and second lock Ruth had installed because she understood fear better than I ever did, a voice whispered, close enough that I felt it in my teeth. Evan. It sounded like Kyle's voice, or Jean's, or Don's, or my own. It sounded like whoever had practiced being human in that wallpaper room until they got the pronunciation right. Open, the voice whispered. We brought the slab. I didn't move. I couldn't. My eyes locked on the door handle. In dreams, I always held it. In dreams, I always kept them out. But dreams have rules. Real life doesn't. The handle turned, just slightly. A test, a promise. From the hallway came the wet, rustling shuffle of bodies, eager and listening. And in that dim yellow light that never truly illuminated anything, I realized the worst part wasn't that they'd come for me. The worst part was that somewhere, in some room with striped wallpaper, I was already standing in line, already waiting, already smiling for the camera, like I'd agreed, like I'd been listed, like I'd been sold.